Hi, I'm Jill. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am so excited to be releasing my latest pattern, Derek. He is a slouchy messenger bag with a very masculine feel. He is totally unisex and such a fun sew with so many options. Let's get into the tutorial now. So this is everything you're going to need to make your Derek. Now the first thing you need to do is make some choices because there is so many options with this pattern. Now let me show you a few of them. This is a Derek. This has got the Velcro tab on it, on the front closure and also the back pocket. Now this same tab can be a magnetic snap instead of Velcro, or you can use the bonus pattern to put a buckle on the front, which I will show you when I finish that later. So first of all, you need to choose which tab option you are making and cut those out accordingly. There is also an option to have a hidden magnetic snap in behind here. So it just looks like a plain pocket, but it's got a hidden magnetic snap or just a slip pocket. You've also got choices for your pockets. And here they are here. You have got your plain slip pocket, your strap tab with a buckle ladder lock, or the toggle pocket, which I'm making today. So choose which of those you want, and it doesn't change the pocket pieces that you cut, but it will change your accessories that you need to make them with. So the other option you have is your strap connectors, and if you're using a raw fabric and it's quite thick, you might want to cut the F part in half, but I'll talk to that as we go. So we need a body, 2 exterior and 2 lining. I'm using waterproof canvas for my lining. Our base, when I waxed this canvas, I waxed it with interfacing on it, so that's quite heavy. So I've left it on there for my base and a bit of waterproof canvas. Going for a contrast for my pockets and base, you can keep it all the same or you can change it up. So my pocket, I'm using the waxed canvas again for the exterior of my pocket. Now I do ask you to use a thinner lining for this because if you're on a domestic machine, we do create pleats at the bottom and I don't want that getting too chunky for your machine. Now I have sewn 2 bits of exterior together and I have sewn butterflied and sewn those down to keep it flat for my lining for my pocket because I think that looks cool to have a bit of a peek of a neat fabric inside your pocket. So then we have got our strap tab and I've cut mine full because I'm going to be using the contrast fabric as opposed to the raw or anything else. I think they look quite cool. Now our zipper facing. Again, the zipper facing is what turns in around the zip. Now personally, I don't think you can ever hide it completely. So unless you've got something that you don't mind peeking out the side of your zip, I would keep it as your exterior. But you're welcome to use a lining or anything else for that. We need our D's, and this is where the choices come in with your closed tabs. So if you are doing Velcro or magnetic on both the front and the back pocket, you would need 4 D1s and 2 D2s because they are a set. 2 D1s and 1 D2 makes 1 tab. So if you're only doing it on the front or the back, you might need to adjust that, and that's clearly set out in the pattern. Strap ends, they are our H. Now they are simply to go over the edge of your strap to make that a bit of a feature. Then we have our zip details. Now these are the little pieces that go on the end of our zip when that's all installed. So we need our zip and we need our pocket trim for our interior pocket. So I've asked you to do the E2, which is the front and slip pockets, in a lighter. Now it's entirely up to you. Be aware of your thickness, because these are your front zipper pockets and your interior pocket, which will get folded like that. So I've got webbing for my strap. Depending on the pocket you make, because I'm doing the toggle, I need 2 pieces of elastic or cord. I've got my zipper pull, and for my pockets I've also got these small little toggles. You can use any kind of toggle you need, and you might need to have a look at your toggle when you're doing the instructions because so many of them are different in how they work. I've got 2 rectangle rings and a buckle slider. I have got my eyelets, which I am using for my pocket. Obviously you don't need those if you're not doing this type of pocket. And I'm using some little rivets at the top of my pockets and they are a complete extra and not even mentioned in the pattern, but I think they look quite cool. But I'm aware that not everybody has them. And this pattern, when I designed it with the young chap that I did, he said he didn't want bling and hardware all over it. So that is how the pattern is designed. And if you're doing the Velcro tabs, you will also need some hook and some loop of the Velcro. So I'm doing 2 sets, so I need 2 D2s and 4 D1s. You will need a marker pen, a ruler, and your pieces of Velcro. So the first thing we need to do is glue 2 together. Now you can either use double-sided tape, which I've put on the set, and you want to line these up the best you can. So it is purely up to you what you use to attach them, and I am going to edge coat these, so I want them to be as close as I can get to the edges lining up. Now if you want, you can always trim these bigger and trim them down once you have them stuck together. So let's do this one. So now we want to get a piece of our Velcro hook, which is the one with the little sharp hooks on it. So you want to place that 1/4 of an inch from there like that and glue that in place. So put glue, you can use double-sided tape, but I find the glue works better with the Velcro. So you're putting glue on the back of it. And centered across 1/8 of an inch away from the end, like that. This Velcro is a bit short. This is 2-inch Velcro, but it tends to be a little bit inconsistent with its size. So 1/4 of an inch away from the side, line that up against your ruler and centered this way. I'm just going to let that set off just a little bit, and we'll prepare the next ones as well. So these ones we're doing on the right side, and we're going to put our Velcro in the middle like that. So it should just be ever so slightly short of your tab. Again, glue those in place. Now just center that. So you should have a full piece of Velcro on that side and just a smaller piece on that. So these we're going to put aside. Now you can melt your edges and edge coat those if you want. These ones we're going to sew 3mm into our Velcro around the edge and then across in the corners. So I shall go sew those in place. So there are 2 tabs. Now I have done that one in the formation that was requested in the pattern. In this one I have actually tied them, pulled them through and fed the ends into the glued area and behind. So I'm now going to edge coat these. Now I just snip the very tiny little corner off like that. Now obviously you don't have to, but I think it looks a little bit neater once it's finished. So that's our tabs, and we will put those aside. So the next thing we're going to do is our strap tabs. Now this is quite solid, but if you're using something, because it's well interfaced, if you're using something that's got a give to it, I would suggest putting Deckerville light down the middle of it. So put a piece of double-sided tape down the middle. Don't know if this will stick very well to the waxed canvas either. So then we want to fold that over to the middle. So now we want to cut that in half so that we've got 2 tabs. Simple as that. We want to draw a line at the place we are given in the pattern. Then we want to draw or sew from that line down each of those ends like that. So we've measured from this end and we're going to sew. So we're going to top stitch from the end to the line on each side at 3mm from the sides. So I don't top stitch in the middle, I leave long tails to pull them through. Now these here we want to pull to this end, to the end that's not, so if you've got glue or anything in there, you can just attach those. So you can, if you're using fabric, you can double-sided tape, just double-side those tapes. So you've got them top stitched on either side to the end like that, and the ends tied under. You want to get your rings, and you want to draw a line from the unsewn end, 1.5, like that, and fold that up to meet there. I might need some clips. So 1.5, and we're folding to the line, not past the line. So you want to make sure these ends don't come out. You want them staying tucked in nicely like that. You want to put your rectangle ring on the end and fold that in. So we're just folding that one over to meet that line there. Retrieve our two body pieces. Now we should have marked all our centres. Now what we want to do here is get some scraps of Decovil Light that are at least the width of our strap connector. Now if you're able to adhere those to your fabric, I suggest doing that as you do it. And we're wanting to put one of these on each of these with it going the long way. What I suggest in the pattern is putting a bit of double-sided tape over the back here where it joins, just at the bottom. But I don't think this is going to work for me because of the wax in the canvas. So line that up in the middle, and I can still see where my centre line is. Make sure all your edges are pushing in nicely. Now what we're wanting to do is draw a rectangle on here in line with our stitching we've already got. So 3mm from the bottom, or 1/8 of an inch from the bottom, to the line between our stitching, and then across in diagonals to our corners like that. So what we're going to do is start stitching here, go up, round the rectangle, up, across a double stitch at the top for reinforcement, and back to this corner. So you can either leave long tails at the end to pull through, now what I do suggest is pulling that down if you've glued it and just trimming that. You don't want anything high above it like that. So that's our two rectangle rings, or our strap connectors, all connected. So I'll put those to the side for now, and we're going to get our pocket lining and our pocket. Now normally it does not have a seam down the middle, but I have joined two pieces. So we want to put those right sides together, and we're going to start sew along the top seam with a 5mm, which is between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch, but we want to start the same distance in. So we're starting a good 1/4 of an inch in on both sides. Right, so now we want to open that up. Now I am using this as my lining and this as my right side. So on the wrong side we want to make some marks. All these marks are going to be 1/4 of an inch away from the centre seam, either this side or that side. So we're on the exterior, which is this one, but inside we want to make a mark at 3.5 and 4.5 from each end. This stuff's easy because you can just mark it. 3.5, like that. And don't forget, we want them to be 1/4 of an inch down, so I'm just going to go like that from my seam. So there's my seam. I want them to be 1/4 of an inch down, like that. So they're the ones in our exterior. So on their lining, we want to mark the centre, which I've already got the centre because I've got a seam down there, and we want to go 4.5 from that side. Now that's not going to be that clear to see, so I might have to use something else. 1/4 inch on the side of our seam. So we are only doing this for the toggle pockets. We don't do this for the any other pockets. If you're wanting to do a different style of pocket, you'll need to follow through the instructions for that. So what we're wanting to do now, in each of these here, the two on our exterior, is to put an eyelet in. Get our 2 bits of elastic and our 2 toggles. So we want to attach a piece of elastic. So from this side, we want to push our elastic through each eyelet. Now, depending on the style of toggle you have, you may need to put it through here as well. Some require that you do, and some it doesn't matter, you can put it through later. So these ones I need to put it through now. And back through the other side. Do the same with this piece. So that's both our toggles. Flip that over. Now on the lining side, we want to bring that down 1/4 inch and out the side 1/4 inch. So it should be right up against your seam. On both sides. And what we're doing here is we will catch this in with our seam when we sew it next. Now this side, we want to bring past this line here and the same distance down. So we're wanting to base that on there, like that. So we don't want it twisted, we want it to be the same. So I need a little bit more. Like that. So I'm going to go baste that on that line and just baste that bit on the side there. So trim up those ends. They are in our lining, don't forget, not our exterior. So we want to pull, not tight, we just want to make sure that this is taut on that side because we don't want to catch it in our seam. So now we want to put our lining right side together, lining up our seams, and we want to sew down the sides. Now we want to start where we stopped in this seam here and come down here. And the same with this side, starting there and go down there. So just down the sides. Okay, so that's what we've got. So what I've done there is I've actually turned and gone back that way a little bit, but you don't need to. So what we're going to do now is just trim our corners. Don't trim the elastic, leave that edge nicely like that. And we're going to turn our pocket right side out. So the basting may be outside the seam, but if that's okay because it's going to be on the inside. Make sure all this is nicely through, that nothing is dropping down. So what we're going to do now is top stitch along here, so at a 20mm or 3/4 inch seam allowance. Now if you've used bigger rivets, eyelets, or they've come too close, you may need to put in your zipper foot to do this. So that is our pocket. Now I don't suggest gathering it up, leave it flat for now. So now we want to make some marks on our pocket. Now we're going to do this on the right side and we'll go from each end. So this is going to be along the bottom. So we want to come along 1 3/4. Now I'm just going to make a small mark like this. 3, 4 1/2, and 5 3/4. So we'll turn that around and do the same from the other side. Make sure you've got a definite straight edge there. So we'll start with a 5 3/4, 4 1/2, 3, and 1 3/4. So it's easier if these are facing towards you. Make a pinch right on that line. Definitely not over it because you want the pleats to be slightly under, if anything. So that line should be completely on the line and it should be just meeting like that. So that your lines are just meeting, don't have it past it because it's going to make your pocket too short. Put a clip in there. And then this side, pinch on that line there and bring that to meet that way. So that both the lines should be coming in to meet each other, or both the pleats should be coming in towards each other. They should be facing each other like that. You can do the same on the other side. Pinch on the line and over to meet like that. So that the lines are just meeting. Do not have it past it at all. If these are too big, we're going to have to adjust it because we want our pocket to be a particular measurement. It can be longer, but it cannot be smaller. So we want to measure along the bottom. We want 19 5/8. And we're nowhere near it. So obviously I have made that a little bit too tight, so we need to pull our, yep, see that one's a little bit tight. We need to pull them back a bit so that we have got that. Okay, so that was well over. Yep, and that is right. So what we want to do now is baste along the bottom just to hold those in place. So now we want to retrieve one of our D2 tabs that we had earlier. So we should have a line down our pocket, which we created earlier, so I know where that is from that. We want to put that centered over the line, so we can kind of give it a bit of a fold to find it. And we want it to be 3 mil or 1/8 of an inch down from the top. Now we want to sew around that rectangle, catching our Velcro and the crosses in the middle as well. So we shall sew around and cross hatch. So that is our pocket all ready to go on our bag. So we'll just put that aside for now. So next we want to retrieve our zipper facing. So what I'm going to do is just fold this so I can establish where my lines are. So we want a 1/2 inch zipper box. So we want that to be 6 1/4, like that. So that is our sew lines. Now you can also draw cut lines on there too, which would be down the middle. I'll see if this pen draws on it. Right, so we want little triangles to the side or diagonals to the side and a line down the middle. So what we're really concerned at the moment about is our red line. So get one of your A body. Now, depends which side you want your zip on, because this is a bit strange. Have it on the right, have it facing you. So this is the side of the bag. So if you fold the bag like that, if you put the zip on that side, it's going to be on the right side when you're wearing it. And if you put it on that side, it's going to be on the left side when you're wearing it. So you need to just establish which side you want it on. Let's change it from the pattern. So you can have it on any side you want, and the instructions are like that. So what we're concerned with is this red box here. We want that to be 90 mil or 3 1/2 inches from the side that we want our pocket to be on. So I'm going 3 1/2 inches to the red line. Now we also want it up 1 1/2. So 1 1/2 to the red line, don't forget. So if you've got fabric that you can pin, it's a good idea to put some pins in here. So I'm just going to put 2 pins right in the middle. Now you could double side tape in behind just in the zipper box, but obviously it doesn't work for me. And then double check that, 1.5 and 3.5. Yes. So what we're going to do now is just stitch down these outside red marks only, not across the top, just the long lines on the red only. So as you can see, I have sewn down the 2 red lines, and that's all. Now I did back at the beginning and the end. So now we just want to cut on the blue line. Now when we get to here, stay on the blue line and go right to the last stitch, but don't cut to this last stitch. Like that. So then we just want to give that a fold back. Now this here, just fold it across. And we just want to bring all that through to the other side. Make sure that's rolled out nicely and that it's nice and creased on the fold. Like that. And so we'll put that aside and we'll just prepare our zipper pocket. So we need 2 of our E2 pieces. Leave the other one for your pocket. And what we're going to do now, and I can actually use some double-sided tape because it will work. Now you don't have to, obviously. Now we're working on the short edge. And we're going to be doing something a bit strange. We're going to put the tape, the zip, on the right side of the fabric, facing upwards. So the right side of the zip up on top of the right side, and line up that edge. Now my zip's way too long, but it's just a length I had left. So we can also put a piece of double side tape down this side. So we're going to sew down here. Now I like to keep this to about 1/8 of an inch down here. So as you can see, I haven't got my zipper pulley on yet, and that doesn't matter. So now we want to take our other piece off here. Take the right side, keep the right side up, so you've got wrong sides facing each other. Line up, we'll put it this way, line up the edges of your pocket down behind and bring that over on the edge of that fabric. Like that. So your pocket lines up at the back, so inside it's all right sides together, and we want to sew down that edge now. The next thing I do is I open that out, open the seam, and just sew down that seam like that. It just makes it easier when it's flatter, so I do that on both sides. So what you should have now is both your seams sewn flat like that. Now don't forget to put your zipper pull on. And if it is crooked, you can always fix it up, which mine is a little bit. So put the zipper pull on from the right side of the zip, obviously. It's going to line up. So I'm going to trim my zip a little bit, not much. Can trim it again later. Use a 3mm or 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape if you do this, and I like to keep it away from the very end because you're just going to pull it off there anyway. Now just put it over those rows of stitching. The reason why I've sewed those down is it's so much easier with them flat like this. Now again, I guess this is pointless because it's not going to stick. to my edge. Never mind. It was a good plan. So now we want to make sure our zip is closing to the top and center it over like that. So we want to have centered over the top and bottom and centered over the zip like that. I'm picking that will not stick, but we'll give that a try. So now we want to sew around that rectangle. Now I like to keep it at about a 3mm or 1/8 of an inch, or even a little bit closer if you want to. So I'm a little bit high, but that will be okay. Now make sure that both your pockets are out flat like that at the back. So what we have now is our zip all sewn in, going to the top. We have one lining that way and one lining that way. Now this seems a bit odd. We want to bring that lining over that way. Now it does seem like it's off the side of the bag, but that is correct. So we don't want to bring our zip over, just the lining. So keep the zip flat. Another reason why it's good to use thin lining, and just trim that like that. So don't forget, this is our front. So if we've got our lining going that way, it's going to be on the side of our pocket, and that's not what we need. So we want to fold that down now so that we can sew around there, down there, fold that up and back to here. So we'll go and close in our pocket. So that's what we've got at the back, and our pocket is all enclosed in there, like that, and the right sides are facing. So what we want to do now is get our little zip ends. So because I can't actually use double-sided tape, what have I got? We want to put these just over the end. Now when I say just over the end, you want them just sitting, so they're about less than 1/8 of an inch past the end of that. So if we were to put it there, we want it less, just a couple of mils past there. Now we are sewing on there, and yes, it is going to fix the pocket there, but it gives that pocket there extra strength, and it does here too. So the same with that one, center it over the zip. So it's centered over the zip, come down here around and across the bottom on both of those. Make sure your lining is out flat at the bottom. So as you can see, it is just past the edge. So if I'm stitching down there at 3mm, it is going to be catching underneath there. And obviously it's wider here, so yes, the seam here is going to be past this one here. So just take your time, and it is quite thick because it's going over the end of the zip. So just take it stitch by stitch. So that's what you've got. You've got your zipper ends sewn, and I've tied mine and taped them at the back. So that is our front all completely finished, or our zip front finished. We now want to take our other A body. Now please make sure that this is at the top, because it's very easy to get it confused and have one upside down. And line up our edges. And we want to sew down here at a 10mm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So again, we've got our lining out that way, and that is joining our back seam. So then we just want to open up our back, so we want to bring the seam to the right. So have it on the right and just open that over like that. Now, it doesn't really matter if it's the left or the right. I just say the right because it's good to have consistency through the bag. Open that up, and we're wanting to top stitch, open that up and top stitch down that seam at, I'm going to go with a generous 3mm. I'm between a 3 and a 6, so between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. I want this to be a little bit more of a feature, and don't forget we've got our lining out the side. So that's our back all top stitched. So I'm not sure if all this is going to fit on the screen, but I'll try and keep as much of it as I can because we're getting quite big now. Okay, so now we want to get our pocket. That's all complete. Now, you should have a center mark, so line that up with your seam, not with the stitching, with the seam. So I've got a small V that I've cut there. And just work your way out your pocket, lining up your edges. You don't need to think it's getting too close to your zip, it's perfect. It's meant to be fairly close. So what you can do here, if you want to make sure this is straight, you can measure from this end, because we want this definitely to be at 90 degrees with the seam. So if you measure what you've got here, like that. Now if you're not using something you can put a pin in, I'd suggest putting a little bit of double-sided tape, but I'm just going to measure as I sew because I can't put anything in. So I'm going to take my ruler to my machine and just keep it in place. So what we're going to do now, we're going to sew 2 rows of top stitching down here, one at 3 mil and one at 6, and we're going to baste along the bottom. So I start here, go up, across 1 stitch and back down for my 6 mil, along the bottom to the 3, up, across and back down for the 6. So that's our pocket all sewn on. So I've come up here and gone across the top and back down. So that's on both sides and it's level, and I haven't caught my lining in the back. Oh, my stitches have come off there, that's okay. So now we want to draw a mark from our center line. Now that might be difficult to see if you haven't marked it. So make sure that's level over the center. And we're wanting to come 4 3/4 from there, from that center line there. And I can see it at the bottom, so that's cool. So we're going 4 3/4. Now, if you're using wax canvas and you're marking it like this, I'm just scoring it very, very lightly. I'm definitely not pushing on it. So again, we're going to stitch up, come across towards our pocket, and then down. So the second row of stitching is the pocket side. So up, across, and back down. So now we're going to take the tab that we created earlier, put a bit of double-sided tape on the top, just in the middle, not around the edges. So it won't stick to my oil canvas, but never mind. So now we put the Velcro over the top, that bit on the pocket. Now if you're using the magnetic snap, make sure it lines up underneath. Make sure it's centered on your center seam and secure it just above the pocket with the double-sided tape. So now we want to find our ruler and we want to draw a line 3 mil or 1/8 of an inch from the top edge. And then we want to line up our stitching on our previous rectangle. So it should be 3 millimeters from the edge, but if you've done it differently, just line it up. So that's on both sides. Then we want to draw the bottom of that rectangle so that the rectangle equals 1 3/4. So there is definitely a gap between the 2 rectangles. So I find it easier at this point if you undo your magnetic snap or your Velcro and just pop that in underneath the pocket. In that case, you can draw your cross lines without it being in the way. So now we're going to sew with the square and cross formation that is in the pattern. So we're going to put that right sides together. Now I keep it this way so that the pocket, I can see my pocket is out of the way. And we just want to line that up along that edge. And we're going to stitch across here at a 10 mil, 3/8 of an inch, as we did the other side. But as I said, it's much easier if you keep it that side so that your pocket doesn't flip back and get in your seams, because then it's a whole other job. So that is all sewn. Now we want to open it up and have the seam folding to the right. So if we're looking at it, we're having it folded to the left because we're on the wrong side. Now you can either do this from the inside or you can turn it through. I'm going to do it from this side. What we're going to do is top stitch down here. So on the side of that seam, top stitch like we did on this side. Now it does get a bit tricky because you're coming into your bag, but just hold it in place and you'll be fine. So now we want to turn our bag inside the right way. So we've got our pocket all at the back. Now obviously your pocket might be on the other side if you've opted to put it on the other side. So now we want to take our tab of Velcro that we made back in step 1 and we're going to put it on the front. That is going to be 5 1/4 from the bottom. We want it centered. And again, if you have used something that actual double-sided tape works on, I'll give this a try. So put it on and then give yourself some time to just measure that it's right. As again, sew around with our formation. I've got glue on there which I'll try and get off. So we're going to start along here, go around the edge of our Velcro and then do our crosses. Again, if you're using a contrast, you might want to pull your stitches through. And if you're not, just go along and double along the top, which gives you a reinforcing row. So we'll sew, just holding everything out the way as you sew around. So the other thing I suggest, if you're using rivets, do that before you sew your seam. I forgot to mention that. So we'll just put that aside for a second and get our base. Now this is the wrong side of my base. And I'm going to draw a line 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre from each of these long edges. So I can just see that, so I'll be able to use that. Now if you're an experienced sewist, you can just sew around this base in one piece if you wish, and you don't have to do it the same way. So I'm going to now turn my bag inside out. And we're looking for our back seam. So our back seam is the pocket one. So it's the one with the pocket on the other side. And we're wanting to line up a center point on our base with the back seam. Now not the top stitch, the back seam. And make sure it's lined up like that. We are going to be stitching it from the other side, but get a couple of, it's easier to see your seam from this side because the pocket's in the way. So do a couple of clips either side. Now we want to come along and clip to that line. In fact, I'm going to put a clip just past it because we're going to sew to and from the line. So now we're going to sew between that line and that line at a 10 mil or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay. So now we've got, turn it around so that we've got the base at the top like that. And we want to line up the bottom seam or the front seam with the center of our base like that. Again, so between those two marks, pays to lie it down flat so that you've got it definitely flat, like that. And again, make sure your pocket is out of the way. So between the two marks again at 10 mil, 3/8 of an inch. So what we've got is our base sewn like that between our marks. So what we need to do now is get a sharp pair of scissors, and we want to make a snip in the body only to that seam. Don't cut the seam. You don't want to be cutting the base, just the exterior and the pocket. Like that. So when you lie it down like that, if you can see, the seam becomes straight across there. So get your seam straight. And we're going to do that with both sides. So in sewing this, we want to start just past this little pleat. So we're starting in the seam on the stitch we left. So just over here, and finishing here. We're not coming out here because we are going to snip this corner off in a minute. So that's what we've got. We've stitched just past that point there. So we'll cut that little bit off there. Don't cut your stitching. And just trim that down a little bit. So now within our seam allowance, we want to sew another seam all the way around just inside here. So 1/8 of an inch away from here within the seam allowance, just as a reinforcing stitch. So that's what we've got in our base. We've got our second row of reinforcing around the edge. So that is our exterior pretty much done. So we'll put that aside and we'll move on with our lining. So now we'll move on with our lining and we'll make our pocket to start with. We need our remaining E2 and our G pocket trim. We're going to take our lining, fold those right sides together, clip that together. We're going to just sew down those two edges at a 6mm or 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So now we want to snip off our corners. Now you don't have to snip these corners if you're using a thinner fabric because it is an end corner, so it can be quite okay without it. So get your fingers in and just turn those, push those right out. And just give that a bit of a pressure out with your scissors. Now just get those, your fingers in there, give that a bit of a tug, and we're going to baste across that top edge. So now we want to get our trim, and I'm going to add some double-sided tape down the middle. Now this waterproof canvas does not fray, and I'm happy to use this as a trim, but this definitely needs to be something that doesn't fray. So now we want to put that trim just under halfway onto our pocket so that it's sitting just less than halfway, because we want to fold that over and match that up, and we need to allow for the turn like that. So now we just want to top stitch across there, but we don't want to sew off here because we're going to cut that off. Just start on here and finish on the edge there like that. Now if you leave all those long and just run your scissors up the side of your pocket, you won't catch anything. And we're going to place our pocket on our lining. Now there's no right and wrong way up. They're both the same. So as long as it's going vertical, and you need to be 2 3/4 from the bottom. Now I know it seems wrong, but this is going to fold over at the top, so you want it at the bottom. So I'm going to sew down here, around and back to the top, fairly close to the edge of the pocket. So that's our pocket all sewn. We now want to get our other lining body, line that up, and we want to sew down both edges. Now it's right sides together. Sew down both. Now this is the longer edge. Don't forget, it's going upwards, and we're going to sew down each of these seams at a 10mm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So that is our lining. Now what I suggest you do, if you can at all, depending on the fabric you're using, is if you open these seams and give them a press down. And so that's our lining. So I'm just going to keep that there for a minute. Then retrieve your base. So I'm just going to fold that up out the way. And on the wrong side, so I'm going to draw a mark 3/8 of an inch in from the end on all the corners. So in from the long end, just like we did with our exterior. Now don't forget you're putting this at the bottom. So the closest to your pocket, that's where you're putting it. So we're going to line that up there. Just put a couple of clips in there for now. And we're going to clip to our mark. Flip it over and do the same. Line up the centres at the bottom. Don't forget we're right sides together. So I'm going to have my pocket on the front. So I'm going to leave a turning gap in here. So I'm going to mark, it's not a big turn because we don't have any interfacings or foams or anything on here. So I'm just going to leave that much unsewn. So here I'm going to sew between that mark and that mark, that mark and that mark, and on the back we're going to sew between the marks like that. So we'll go and do that. So that's what we've got. On the front we've just got the two pieces sewn between our marks, and on the back we've got the sewing between the two long marks like that. So what we want to do now is pull the lining back out of the way. I can do it in a way you can see. We're not wanting to cut that base. We're just wanting to cut a notch to the seam like that. It's on the back side, but we don't want to cut our base. So I find it easier if you pull out the bag like that, get your fingers in the end of it, and pull your base out flat. Now, your seam should line up with the middle seam or with the middle mark on. So your seam should line up with the middle mark on your base, and we're going to clip across there. Do that on both sides, and we're wanting to sew from this mark here across and back. Now you can come ever so slightly onto this peak, but don't go too far past it because we're going to cut that corner off. So we've got our ends sewn across there, and I'm just going to snip that edge. Now don't cut your stitching. And that is our base all done. So now we'll turn our lining inside out. So decide if you want your pocket to the front or the back, and I'm putting mine to the front. So I want that to be up and the front to be up. I'm going to slip my lining inside my exterior like that. We're going to line up our centre seam on our bag with the midpoint on the lining. Don't forget your seams are going to be on the side, so they're going to line up with the gap on the side. Now keep in mind, if you are keeping your seams out butterflied or whether you are lying them down, make sure it's consistent from the base as it is here. Now it's a pretty tough bag, so if you have to manhandle it to get it all in the right place, then do that. If you can't be tough with it at this point, you've got a problem. Clip that all the way around. Now don't forget, when you're lining it up is your seam, not your top stitch that goes to the centre. So now we're just going to sew around there with a 10mm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Right, so that's our bag all sewn around the top. Now get your hand inside, pull out your lining. Now this all seems a bit strange. Put your lining back out that way, and your base is like that. So you'll have the front and the front. Flip it over to the back and fold it in half. So you've got the back to the back, and we want to line up these seams here. So line up your centre marks. And we're just going to baste along the very edge of this seam. Not down here, just within 1/8 of an inch of the edge. Now this is just to keep the lining down in the bag. So that is like that, and your bag is actually attached to itself, but that's no problem. Put your hand in the turning gap and just start pulling your bag out. Now don't turn your lining or your bag right through at this stage. You put your hand in and put some pressure along that top seam, just to open that out. And if you want to do any work with opening up these seams, you might want to do that now. But we're going to actually close our lining before we turn the bag the other way. So just fold your lining in together at the seam in the middle. And we're just going to stitch across there. Now you can stitch across the whole seam, or you can just stitch along the bit, along the very edge of that. So that is our bag all closed up. So just get your hand in there and start pushing your bag right side out. And of course the lining is going to just go down into the bag because it's already attached. Get your finger down in there and push your corners out. So you can feel your way through your lining to get your corners pushed right out. And that should be the same distance as it is around the corner like that, which it is. And that's why you have to have your pocket at the right size so that it all lines up. So now for the fun bit. If you pull this past, especially if you used wax canvas, you can just do a bit of a crease around the top. Now I do suggest clipping all the way around when you're going to top stitch. Don't just think you'll pull it back at your machine, because you do want to keep it in place, because you're going to be able to see all the way around here when the bag is open or closed. Now I have seen one of my testers put a magnetic snap to close the bag in the top, and you're welcome to hack the pattern to do anything like that, because this bag can be used open full from that, and it actually fits a full laptop in it, which is how it was designed. Right, so that's our top stitch. So now we're just going to top stitch around the edge. Now you can either do this with 1 or 2 rows of stitching. I actually like to do it with a generous 3 rather than doing 2 rows, and I ask for a 3mm in the pattern. So just whatever you like to use, we're going to top stitch around the whole top. Now don't forget, this is the front of the bag, so you may not want to start at that point. I would suggest starting over here. Find the other tab that we made. Now I have edge coated this. Again, I'll attempt to put some double-sided tape on there. Now this stitching is going to be right through into your inside of your bag. So you might want to put a matching cotton on your bobbin if you have got a contrast lining. So before we put that on, what's easier is if we draw the lines on it before we put it on. So again, we're wanting to draw a line 3/8 of an inch along there. Now I'm using a silver leather marker, and it should line up with these marks as well. So it's 1/8 of an inch down there. And we want our rectangle, so we're measuring at 1.5 there. Now the reason being we want it there is we want quite a gap between the two. Right, so I'm going to line that up. So that top stitching, or that line there, is in line with my top stitching there. So you want it centered on here and in line with that there. And again, centered with your seam, not your top stitching. So I'm just going to go round the rectangle, double across the top, and then back and finish down that bit. But that information is in the pattern. And because this is right through, make sure you've got either matching or cotton. That's not going to be a problem on your lining. So that is my tab all done. Now don't forget to wipe off your silver pen because it can mark. So that is our derrick almost finished. pocket on the back. I'll give those a good wipe just to, you can pull your toggles up if you want, or just leave them loose. They can be used or tightened whenever you want. So now we need to do our strap. Length of webbing, my tri-slide which I'm using as opposed to an adjustable slide, and my 2 strap ends. So I'm just going to run a permanent marker just on the inside of those. So I'm going to put a couple of pieces of double-sided tape down the edge. Now I don't want it to come past the edge, so I'm going to have to trim that a little bit. So get your end, and you're wanting to, that's my centre, put it just shy of centre, like that. Wrap that firmly around the edge and pressure that down onto your strap. Now I'm also going to just trim that edge up, just running the scissors along the side of the strap, so you do not want to cut your strap. Because I'm going to use contrast cotton, I'm not going to sew along there at this stage. I'll do that as I put it on the bag. So there's 2 ways to do this, and I'm not actually going to loop it through. In the pattern I have you do this. And sew it like that on there. I'm going to make a feature of this piece, and I'm going to leave it loose. So all I want to do with one piece is feed it through my bag like that, but I'm going to put it in from the outside. Bring it up so that there's 40 mil past there. Some double-sided tape on there. And put it on the outside like that. Now we're going to keep that the same way, and we're going to put it through our rectangle ring. Through the inside of that, because I'm going to make a feature of this, and I will loop it through there. Now I'm just going to sew a feature on that piece, and I'm going to sew that through there. So that's going to stay as a feature on the outside like that. I'm going to mark my rectangles. So it's up to you whether you draw these on the strap or whether you just eyeball it. So that is Derek all done. I have switched to black because I think I like black. I'm actually going to edge coat the edge of those. And I think because I've got a different slider, I didn't have a gunmetal one, I've put the black on the straps. I think that's quite cool. So that is our boy. He's all done. Slip pocket, decent sized slip pocket. We've got our pocket in there, which is quite a big pocket. Goes over the other side, over to here, more than big enough for a phone or a wallet. These are big enough for a drink bottle and can be tightened up. So as you can see, there's so lots of things you can do with this. And this is definitely a unique look with this waxed canvas. Now you might have noticed something. I haven't put my bag tag on it. Now in the pattern, I suggest you put it over here.